how not to react to thought. Well, there are a few approaches that I can think of. One is practicing this meditative process I was doing this morning, unbound consciousness. That teaches you through experience again and again and again that you don't need to react to a thought. It's almost approaching it from the side of consciousness rather than from the side of belief, questioning or challenging a single belief. It's more like tuning into the frequency of consciousness unbound from thought until you just sort of get it. And you will get it at some point. But it takes practice. This is the kind of thing where, like I was saying, I think yesterday at some point, if you practice it, 20 minutes a day, that's one thing. Practice it like 1 to 2 hours a day, you'll see a massive difference in your experience throughout the day. The mind becomes much more calm. Doesn't mean everybody here has that amount of time, but some people do. I've had times in my life, even in medical training, where I meditated 2 hours a day because I just knew I had to. So everybody's life's different, of course, but this kind of practice, the practice of unbound consciousness, really benefits from giving yourself time to do it and being consistent with it. And the components of that are, again, practice by listening to a guided meditation. And about that, I have a playlist called Consciousness. By keeping the aperture of attention wide open, by keeping your attention in the thought and consciousness gate. It's not natural meditation where attention can just go everywhere. It's actually keeping it in that thought gate, which won't be a rigid intention after a while. You'll get what that feels like. It's just a bit of alertness, and finding that balance of alertness and relaxation will allow that to happen. So that's part of it. And the other part is, as I said, really orienting to what is the next thought. What thought is arising now? And that is because when we're reacting to thoughts, when we're already in that, like I said, that co-arisen experience of being the thinker and the thought, right? When we're already in that, we're really resisting thoughts already. But what we're doing is we're keeping a little bit of resistance to keep that distance open, that gap between thinker and thought, that illusory gap. It's not real. But we're keeping that gap open through a bit of resistance already. And then we start pushing and pulling on thoughts. Like, I want more of that. I want less of this. The thought that says I'm not worthy. Ooh, I don't like that one. So then let me push that thought away, and then I'm going to grasp the thought that makes me feel like I have agency. But then, of course, that thought always comes with the other side of the coin where I feel in control, then I feel out of control. So now I'm pushing on that thought, and I'm going to pull on that thought. We don't know we're doing this, by the way. It's not like that obvious because it happens really fast. But that's what we're doing. We're having this like relational thing with thoughts as if we're managing thoughts. And as I mentioned this morning, some of that comes from what your parents told you, right? Pay attention. You're like, whoa, whatever. But we can have that sense inwardly of like, I have to track thoughts. I have to pay attention in the way I had to pay attention to my parents to know what to do, right? Or something like that. So it gets internalized. Or a thought is a memory, reminds us of an event that was scary or humiliating or something. And we're just keep reacting to that same thought as a standing wave of reaction without realizing we're doing it. Or we partially realize we're doing it, but not fully. So all of those ways that thinking sets itself up in the mind, they're all reactive. They're all kind of standing wave of reaction. So that's why turning toward thought is kind of undoing that first step of reactivity in thought, in consciousness. Just being like, oh, okay, well, let's just see what's actually here. Let me just move my attention to wherever the next thought is arising. Where is that? What is that? And anytime a thought is noticed, Now there's not a reaction like, oh no, there's a thought. It's like, oh good, okay, that's the thought. It says, I'm uncomfortable, or I'm hungry, or wonder what time it is. That's the thought. That's the only thing here, one thought. And that's the third part of seeing. Really, really, there's only one thought at a time. Time really starts to hypnotize people. When I'm talking to somebody and they're really lost in thought, it's always time. They're like, yeah, I know, but like I'll say like, see, there's one thought right now. Yeah, I know. But you know what happens though usually is every time meditating, then, it's like you're not in the past, you're right here. But those thoughts will make you feel like you're in the past. And the past is like a graveyard, because you're a ghost in the past in your own mind. So yeah, one thought at a time, noticing there is one thought, because that one thought is consciousness, and there's one consciousness. And then you repeat. Just pay attention. Where's the next thought coming? So open aperture of attention, remaining within that gate of consciousness, noticing the arising thought. And it will become subtle to where it's not even formed as a thought anymore. But the movement is the same. The movement, the way you utilize attention is the same. So that's one way to get under, in a pretty direct way, the relationship with thought. To get under that tendency to form that kind of reactive relationship with thought. Because again, it's never thought that's the problem, it's the reaction to it, the relationship with it. That's one. Number two is uncovering beliefs. You won't recognize a thought as such if it's so habituated in your process that you've become convinced that it's reality, not a thought. And those often are narrative in nature. They're self-narratives. Here's my problem and here's how it always goes. Or here's my health thing, then how I react to it. Or here's my relationship with this certain emotion. Or here's what my mother did to me, or whatever, right? When that feels like reality to you, when it feels like that's definitely real, that's okay. And it's giving you a clue that there's a belief underneath that you may not fully be seeing as a belief. So, as I mentioned earlier, a common thing that we're doing when we're doing Q&As and interacting with people up here is saying, well, what's the belief? What do you think you believe about that? What is the underlying belief, right? What is the associated belief? And it's often the case that someone will be surprised, right? Which is funny in that often these are vasanas or storylines that are very comfortable comfortably uncomfortable. They're very familiar, very well-worn paths of thought and belief about someone's narrative. Like, I don't know that narrative, that's their narrative. And yet when I go, well, what's the underlying belief? They're actually surprised. Oh shit, I actually believe this about this. So again, the habituated nature of thought starts to feel solid, like real, like the world is real. And in that real world, this story is real. But the whole thing can be held up by one belief. Not always, but sometimes it is. Or it can be held up by a couple beliefs. So there are kind of these sentinel beliefs that you find that very much feel like a momentary shift from shit, I didn't even know I believed that, to being like, oh, I can see that I believe that. I can see that thought, and I can see how it's related to these other things. And that actually typically starts a cascade of unbinding that could go on for weeks, months, for a while. So often, if you hear people in these retreats and the Q&As and stuff talking about like, yeah, something's just been falling apart for 3 months, like it's just this whole more and more falling apart. There's like, seems like there's no foundation. And often when people are saying that, they actually don't look distressed. Sometimes, but often they don't. There's something that feels like, yeah, this is this feels natural, and yet it's bizarre, right? Often that whole thing started with undermining a really fundamental belief that they weren't seeing. That's how that gets started usually. Some belief just gets toppled, and then all of a sudden, it's like everywhere you look, things are hollow or falling apart or just not what you thought they were. I don't mean hollow, I just mean not so rigid, not so structured, not so solid. Your inner world, your outer world. And at some point, it becomes obvious the inner world and outer world are both made out of thought. That's deeper stuff, but it's true. And then everything's collapsing. So yeah, I'll just say those are the sort of two methods that can get under the reactivity tendency in thought, that are quite different approaches, but they're both necessary, I think. They both come into play for all of us at multiple points. But one is more practice-based, more of a consistent refinement of unbound consciousness, and one is being a little bit more precise and deliberate about what is the underlying belief here? What do I believe about this? It's a great question to ask yourself, especially when something feels sticky, heavy, triggering, confusing, or tends to cause you to dissociate. Those are good signs that there's a belief to uproot. And the question is simple. What is the belief that's shaping my experience right now?